It's still loading. Okay, I think we're good to go.
Okay, colleagues, we're here. Business Regulation Subcommittee. I have three bills. Well, let's go with the old bills first, Laura. We have House Bill 395 and House Bill 408. One is the chair's bill. One is Delegate Adams' bill. They're both about home improvement contracts. Obviously, I believe we could get work on, I believe the last time we talked about was working on the chairman's bill and moving forward on that and trying to find that. I believe we had some issue with Delegate Queen brought up the issue about a third. Our chairman's bill was a little more nuanced as far as how we would, how he figured we'd break it down for contracts less than 5,000 versus contracts over 5,000. What I would like to do today is briefly discuss the different variations of this bill and actually vote this bill out today. It might not be to everybody's liking, but I know we need to get this moving before these things start stacking up. And I will say that I put some thought into what Delegate Queen said. The issue that I have, and it's been brought to my attention, was that by doing a third, the problem becomes that before doing any work at all, they've gotten almost 70% of the total amount. By doing a third on contract, a third the first day of work, and waiting on a third till completion, the issue, you basically giving somebody almost 70% of the total amount without any work done. They don't really have to do anything but show up that day. And that's a concern for me. Hold on, this is Seth Howard. Hey, Seth, you jumping on?
Oh,
go ahead. Apologize.
To respond to the subcommittee chair's comment, the reason we were doing that was to kind of address the cash flow concern that Delegate Adams' bill was concerned about.
Right. No, I understood. My issue was giving them so much money because the chair's bill was only 50% before they started any work. This is 70% or 66%, which is a great deal more for them to be able to walk away with. And I use my gazebo as the example of, well, instead of walking away with all of it, he'd have walked away with 60% because he was a bum either way. And the worry that that's going to be the issue. And I would definitely want to hear everybody's input, but
so I think the way Laura wrote it, council wrote it, it talks to when the work commences on the project. But she can explain the two variations, because I think the two variations kind of get to everyone's concern. It could get to everyone's concern. Unless, does that make sense, Laura? Do you want me to talk to?
Yeah, sure. No, so Delegate Queen's amendments, we have two different ones. Would you like me to share screen or just talk through them?
You can just talk through them. You sent everybody this stuff already.
Yeah, so one of the amendments is drafted, so it would be a third at the time the contract is signed, or up to a third at the time the contract is signed, up to a third when the work commences, and then the remaining amount wouldn't be able to be collected until the home improvement project is complete or the time period specified in a draw schedule. So theoretically, I guess someone could, the way it's drafted right now, when the work commences, day one, I guess someone could collect the second, third. That language could be changed in any manner that you all wanted, but that, I thought that was the intent, was that it be a third at the time the contract is signed, a third when the work begins, and a third, when it's finished.
Right.
The other amendment in the packet from Delegate Queen adds the $5,000 or more threshold. So it would be a third at the time, up to a third when the contract is signed, up to a third when the work commences, and the remaining amount would be when the work is complete, or for contracts valued at $5,000 or more at the time specified in the draw schedule. You could further kind of bifurcate that so that it would be for those larger contracts. It could still be, at when the project's complete or subject to a draw schedule. Right now it's saying for those larger projects, it's subject to the draw schedule for the
Right.
final payment.
And my understanding, even with those two amendments, is the chair's bill allows only for half of the money to be done until they complete. Whereas this bill would allow roughly 70% of the money to be received once they start. And again, I don't believe that we're doing a service by either of those, because unless we start getting to the vagaries of, once performance has been substantially begun and stuff like that, which again is very much up to the reader, which means we'll have a lot more debate, not only on the floor, but in the, in the individuals with the contract. That's why I thought that after going back and reviewing it, that the chair's view of half versus half up front, no more than half, and then the remainder after substantial completion would be a little more coalescing, because it saves the consumer in that at most they would lose a half. Whereas the other two amendments, they would lose up to 2/3 on the day that they start work. If they never come back, they would lose up to 2/3.
But possibly, and I agree with that, but this doesn't address Delegate Adams' concern about cash flow. That was
Right.
we want to do both in both bills.
Right.
And the reason why we put the draw schedule in there, if I think as a consumer that 1/3 when they commence is too much, we could put together a draw schedule that says,
Right.
you do this after this part is complete, or you do this after that part is complete. So the draw schedule is another way of giving you cash flow, not having the consumer out.
Right.
That's my thought.
Delegate Howard, Howard or Adams, Adams, his bill was for half up front too. He thought that was substantial enough for them to move forward. And
Half up front for a consumer is too much.
okay, but what we've done basically by your amendment is 2/3 up front.
No, 1/3 at contract signing.
Uh-huh.
His was a half at contract signing.
That's correct.
He started any work.
That's correct. And
So I could still do a draw schedule and have it be a half, a third at the beginning, and then have the draw schedule say, I don't pay you that next piece until after you did the, digging the hole first.
and that's no different than the chairman's original bill. That was my point, was by
No, a third. I'm sorry, I don't want a half. The chairman's picking out a half. And
I understand. I'm at the draw schedule. The draw schedule part was what the chairman put in there for anything over $5,000.
right, and we put it back.
And the second one was, but again, my concern, and the reason I could not.
What would you
support
like it changed to then?
I honestly, what I'm saying, and my concern is that if we change it to 2/3 prior to them, once they begin work, they will get 2/3 of the money.
Okay, so change it back to 1/3 and take the second part out when it commenced then.
Then when would they get the second third?
They get the second third from the draw schedule.
Well, then everybody has to go on a draw schedule for anything over $5,000.
So what would you like to see, Chairman?
Well, and again, I'm saying that's why I was leaning towards the chairman's bill. Your worry is that up to half is too much for somebody to pay up front.
At contract signing, yes, because there's a lot of time between contract signing and when you start work.
And is there any way, because the rule says up to 1/2,
Mhm.
they don't have to pay anything. They can pay what they want. And the contractor can say, nope, I don't want to do it unless you give me half. And what you brought up last time was then, okay, but most folks don't know they can find a different contractor, or the difficulty in finding the contractor you want.
Correct.
So we're living in that tension now of a third and then another third as soon as they come on your property again, or 1/2 up front and the other half when they finish.
And the reason that was the approach taken is, again, if you remember the hearing, Delegate Impalario first brought that up. That's what he expects. That's what I've always have seen happen. And so we were basically codifying what has been in practice for some people. Now, I don't understand some contracts that don't do it that way, but that is currently a contract approach that people are accustomed to. But again, I have no problem with you changing it to 1/3 at contract signing, 1/2 at contract signing before you've ordered any sort of materials, before you've done anything else but me say, I want you to build this gazebo. You haven't even gone out and brought the wood. You haven't done anything else. And then you're going to come back and I've given you half of that money.
How about this? And we'll let everybody else talk in a minute. How about 1/3 at signing, 20% upon beginning, which gets us to that 50.
That's okay. I'll take that.
20% meaning they can't ask for anything more than 50% prior to the completion of the contract. No.
And that'll work.
How about, and everybody else, let me know what you think. You can either chime in verbally, raise your hand. You don't have to do either way. How about third up, 20% more when you start the contract, meaning you'll get no more than 50% on the day that you have started, but you start out with 1/3. Then, and again, guys, we're asking for the voting
members.
Started
at 30% because 1/3 is more than that.
Yeah.
30%, 20% is fine.
There you go. And so what I would like to know from the members, Chris, you look angry. What do you think?
No, I'm not angry at all, Mr. Chairman. The problem with the bill, and now I'm thinking I've had this bill for a couple of years asking for half down. The idea of a draw schedule at first blush, I would be opposed to, but understand most home improvement contracts are with contractors that are doing multiple trades within a project. And the reason why the draw schedule is important, it's not because it's between the contractor and the customer. It ultimately comes down between the customer and the bank. And so the bank, I had to actually call a bank and say, explain to me if I wanted to do a $100,000 remodel of my third floor, how you would pay me the money. The bank says, well, this was a real conversation last week. Hey, look, Chris, we're not going to give you $100,000 up front unless you have a home equity line of credit. We're going to say, okay, we're going to give you, say, 25% for rough framing. We'll give you an additional 25% once you have your rough plumbing, your rough electrical work done. And this is the bank talking to the customer, not the customer talking to the contractor. And then ultimately you get to the point where the project's done. And a lot of banks actually show up at a project and look and see if the work is done before they'll issue the payment. So the tension that you're talking about, Mr. Chairman, is a complete different tension than the one that I think Delegate Queen's talking about.
Correct.
Which is I'm the customer who's trying to get work done and I'm paying and I'm not getting, the work completed. What I would say to you is this, that the chairman's amendment actually walks back my bill, considerably. However, after reading it and asking questions of banks and some other contractors, it would not be out of line at all, especially on larger projects, to have this draw schedule. And the banks are the ones that are deciding the draw schedule, not the contractor.
So are you agreeing?
I would support I would support the governor's amendment.
Of course.
I would support the chair's amendment. And frankly, while it's not where I was headed with my bill, I appreciate what the chairman's trying to do based on his experience. And I'm willing to withdraw my bill, although if we take the amendment, maybe I could demonstrate some support by putting my name on his bill.
Yeah, or put you as a number 2. Crap, you moved. Oh, I'm sorry, you just moved on my computer. So, but my issue became, so to me that's not, what you're talking about with the banks is a whole different animal, because again, he can ask for, let's say we do the 20 or the 30% and the 20%, whatever. He can ask, the contractor can ask whatever he wants. But if your bank's like, yeah, out of 100,000, you're only getting 25, that contractor has to suck it up. So I'm saying the chairman's bill, the way it's written, allows for all the things you were discussing with the bank to happen, because that's the amount they're allowed to go to. Okay. So if meaning that if you go to your bank and they said, we're only going to give you $25,000, and guys like, yeah, but I can ask for up to half or up to 1/3. And you can go, yeah, but our bank's only giving me this much. It's almost a non sequitur at that point, because it doesn't matter what he wants. Either he takes what the bank's going to offer or he doesn't. My question really became, because we're trying to cover the genre of all, not just over 5,000, not the big ones, but also the small ones. How do you feel about 1/3 up front, 30% up front, and asking no more than 30% at signing, and asking for additional no more than 20% more at upon delivery or when they actually start the project. How do you feel about that?
No, I would say before I would do that, I would say keep the original, and this is Chris talking, let the committee.
Right.
I would say just leave the original bill or the original law as it stands, and then include a language that says, or as according to the draw schedule. Now, let me just say,
The problem with the original law, Chris, is that they can actually get it all 100% before they do a damn thing. And we're trying to not let that happen.
yeah.
That's why the original law as it stands is untenable.
Original law
So,
can't
so
stay.
where Chris is and where the chairman's amendment is the middle ground in that answer.
What, your bill?
I think the chairman's amendment strikes a balance between where I was headed and where existing law is.
Okay, and I just want to remind my colleagues, what we're trying to do is find a way for that person to have enough money to start the project, and where the individual who's paying for this project can't get robbed but for so much. And that's where my problem was. And that's with the whole 50% up front with Delegate Queen, is that's too much up front that he can walk away without ever seeing your face again. And her trying to find some comfort where it's a third up front and then he gets the other 20% as soon as he shows up and starts working, then it allows him to get his materials. He knows he's got this other 20%. And then the last 50 comes when it's completed. That's what I'm asking. It sounds like, and I'll go to other people, I guess, other folks. I see everybody's raise your hand, guys. I'm trying to get to the committee members first, but I get your point, Chris. I just don't see how it's being missed so far by doing a third or doing 30%, 20%, and the other 50. It's still giving you what you want. It just gives you what you want on the day that they start, not the day that they contract. That's the only difference. Mark, do you have anything to say? You look.
Yeah, so let's just say that you went with the chairman's bill where it's increased to 50%. I'm just saying for the sake of argument at the moment. And you're putting in a floor, and you're putting in flooring an entire house, let's say, and that the cost to put in all new flooring in the entire house is $50,000 because it's a pretty big house and you're putting in marble and all this stuff. Okay, well, the contractor is going to get credit for, as I mentioned the last time, on all of the materials. And so the only real fronting the contractor is going to be putting out is for labor, but he's going to have 30 days on the materials, for sure, at least a legitimate contractor is. And so then there's labor that's involved that the contractor have to pay out of pocket, but the contractor would have gotten under the chairman's bill up to 50%, or whatever he decides to negotiate, and whatever the homeowner decides to negotiate. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of latitude for a contractor. So
did you disagree with the 30% and 20% upon starting the project?
I don't at all.
You don't agree or you don't disagree?
I don't disagree.
Okay, thank you for the double negative. Can I go to Veronica? What are you thinking?
I agree. I mean, I agree with what is this, 30,
20, and 50.
30, 20, 50.
Okay, and Lily, what are you thinking? I'm sorry, Delegate Chi.
No, that's okay. You can call me Lily. I'm trying to understand Delegate Adams' concerns, because his original bill was trying to get contractors more leverage in asking for more to cover the material costs. So are you concerned that under this new solution, you could only ask for 30% instead of 50% at the signing of the contract?
Yeah, I mean, this bill, if you take an amendment like that, you're actually going further away from where I was headed to begin with. And, you know, I would proffer on Mark's example of a $50,000 sale that the cost of goods sold is higher than 25,000.
But that 20%
I'm saying that this is a real problem in contracting, and that the cost of goods are more than the percentages that exist in current law, and that's creating the problem within the contracting industry. You know, the bill, my bill, clearly doesn't have support in the subcommittee, but what I'm saying is that the chairman's amendment speaks to the reality of a project where a bank and where a contractor live on a lot of these projects, not a simple painting project or a flooring project, but rather where most of the challenges come when you have multi-trades and it's there needs to be there's a draw schedule, because it's going to be the customer that's held to account when they're engaging into a contract and their bank's only letting so much money go. So I get now why the draw schedule's there.
So Laura, maybe you need to let people see the language, because the draw schedule is in both of the amendments I'm providing.
Well, right.
It's in all three amendments, actually.
It's all
It's in
three amendments. So when they say it's not the chairman's, it's
No,
basically.
but the draw schedule, the problem with the draw schedule, it's a draw schedule after the 50%. That's what Chris's problem is that it's not a draw schedule originally.
So the way the amendments are drafted now, they can be changed to reflect whatever you guys wanted them to reflect. But the way all three amendments are structured, the draw schedule comes in for the final payment.
Right.
So that's an option for the chair's bill. He has a deposit of up to 1/2, and the
Yes.
remaining amount when the work is, in his amendment language, substantially complete, which is different than completion, obviously,
And that's
or the
another
draw
place for that.
schedule.
Right.
Then Delegate Queen's amendments, it's into three parts, right? So a third, and then a third for completion or subject to the draw schedule. So you could bring in the draw schedule, at a different point in the payment structure, rather than just, if you're doing 3 chunks, doesn't have to just be the draw schedule for the last amount.
And the reason I'm worried about doing that, Laura, is because what happened to the chairman this summer, where the option becomes the rule. Well, if it's a draw schedule on behalf of the company, it's always going to be on behalf of the company, and it's going to basically hurt the consumer. The draw schedule is going to be something more where they get more than 50% prior to starting, which goes addressing hopefully Delegate Queen's issue. Meaning the way the chairman did it was they could collect whatever agreement they worked out by law, they could only get up to 50% prior, and then they could work out whatever schedule they wanted to. So for a $100,000 project, the most they could get prior to starting the project was $50,000, not the whole thing. I see some hands, Madam Vice Chair, and then I'll get Steve and Robert. Madam Vice Chair.
I just wanted to address 2 things. One, the substantially complete that's in the chairman's amendment, I think is important.
We haven't gotten to
You
that
could,
yet.
if you have like a large project and it's a kitchen renovation and you're all done, except that the garbage disposal is on back order. Who knows for how long? I don't think that the contractor should be in the position of not receiving the money. Now, they could, work something out that says, okay, I'm going to withhold the amount of the garbage disposal, but if I've put in the cabinets, put in the floors, put in the sink, and put in the appliances, and I'm still waiting for a third of my money, but the garbage disposal is back ordered, I don't think that's fair. So we've got to, be sure that's substantially complete. And this happens all the time in contracts, and obviously Delegate Adams and Delegate Howard and Delegate Fisher probably know more than I, but I am concerned about the 50% before you start. In whatever form or fashion, whether it's 30% and 20 or 50% up front. I do think the third, unless there is a draw schedule that sets a different formula, is really the direction, particularly in the big, and the $5,000 cap thing for a draw schedule is also worrisome. Like I said, I've just had bathrooms done and it was a third, and a third, with the caveat that if I picked a more expensive tile, I would, put that money up front, which I did in my infinite wisdom. But
when did you pick the other third is the question.
There was a schedule for, it was a third upon signing the contract. It was a third when the demolition was done. And it was a third at the end of the contract, other than if I selected particular, in my case, it was tile that was more expensive than the allowance in the contract. I needed to pay the addition.
And our problem is because that's what one of the other delegates was talking about. Rick was talking about. How do we articulate that second third? Substantial beginning you know, and then we get into the, again, legal vagaries that's why we're trying to figure out a way to do that. Cause we know beginning is easy to identify.
Right.
Halfway through before you get to second, third, that's where it gets difficult. And I don't really know how we can address that. I agree with you. My whole problem was I didn't want to do the second, third upon them showing up because that's way too much money for them to walk away with. I know Chris, you know, is of that they need all that money for their parts and equipment, but I'm more concerned with the consumer not being properly protected. I want to go. So
Well, the only thing you could probably do is just say per the terms of a contract, you know, and it's got to be negotiated.
And again, then we'll be back. I'm worried to what our good chairman went through, where it's contracted, it's negotiated to their terms, and you don't even know you have the right to say no. I think that's what Delegate Queen had mentioned before, that people aren't going to know this unless we make it as clean as possible.
Well, I have one other suggestion. For contracts over $5,000, we should do one thing. For contracts under $5,000, do something different.
That was going to be my other recommendation. We'll come back. I don't want to drag this out, but
yeah, and I don't either, so I'll stop talking.
But it's important. I was going to bring that back around, that maybe we handle the lower, or even maybe raise the amount to 10,000, under 10 and over 10. You know, so small projects get a different amount than bigger projects. Steve, go ahead, and then Robert next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I appreciate the Vice Chair's point. My concern is that substantial completion is just going to be grounds for major disputes as to, you know, the contractor may think something's substantially complete and the consumer is not going to think so. And it's just going to lead to a lot of disputes over whether there's substantial completion. Whereas if you have completion, it's, you know, it's when the project is done. And the other thing is with respect to a draw
if it's
schedule,
a garbage disposal, how do you do that? You know, if it's out of the contractor's control and it's a back ordered item, but like I said, take a kitchen. I've done the appliances, I've done the cabinets, I've done the flooring, I've done the painting, and you want a particular garbage disposal and you're still hanging on to, depending upon what we end up doing, a third of my money or 50% of my money when I've paid my laborers and I've bought all of the big stuff. I mean, I don't care if you define, and what I also want to point out is we didn't hear testimony complaining about there's all of these, you know, that there's been litigation or complaints about substantially performed. And there are vehicles for that through the AG's office and through the home improvement contractor, whatever it is, you know, so that if, you know, there really was sort of a problem, either the contractor or the consumer can go there and say, you know, the contractor can say, look, it is substantially complete. They need a garbage disposal. I don't know where I got that example, but they need a garbage disposal. You know, and say, I need my money. Big contractors, Mark is right, are going to have, you know, credit in the whole routine. But, you know, I had the work done in St. Michael's with the little guy. And you know, I'm sure he had some credit, but he didn't have the kind of credit that he would go in and just buy whatever tile I picked and move on.
Martin doesn't deal with little guys, so.
Yeah, I understand.
But so Steve, before I go to Robert, is there anything else besides that? I know
I don't have a house in St. Michael's either, so.
I also just wanted to mention that, you know, as far as the draw schedule, well, that's nice. The average consumer is not going to be able to negotiate a draw schedule unless they're working with the bank.
Okay.
So that's just, you know, the concern about just deferring to a draw schedule without specifying how that's going to work. So
go ahead, Robert.
Thank you very much. For the Maryland Building Industry Association, and Lori Graff and Jason are on the call as well. The draw schedule is critical for us. We were fine. If you want to say that for, you know, whatever you want to do for the smaller contracts, that's fine. But for us, for the more substantial contracts, they typically come with the draw schedule. We're not, you know, the chairman's example was he bought some carpeting at Home Depot, and they, you know, when he gave him half when he signed or a third when he signed, the next day they called and said, we want the other 2/3 and then we'll come on Thursday. You know, the current law was fine with us. We didn't have a problem with it. Whatever you want to do for larger jobs they typically come with a draw schedule, and the draw schedule may have 6 or 10 points. We sent one to Delegate Queen for her to look at. I think it had 8 different points in which more money was given. I think the initial first draw was maybe 20%. That's not our goal. Isn't to grab a whole lot of money up front, or even grab a whole lot of money when we start. Our goal is to say, okay, here's a draw schedule for these larger jobs, and you can define what the larger job is. Here's this draw schedule for larger jobs, and when we complete this, we get that. When we complete this, we get that. When we complete this, we get that. And that's, for our industry, is the most important thing for us to maintain. And I'm not aware of a single complaint with anybody about the larger jobs and what the licensed contractors do, who are subject to regulation by the Home Improvement Commission, and claims in front of the AG. So that's always been the issue with us. So the chairman's amendment and Delegate Queen's amendments are fine with us, because it deals with the situation for the larger jobs. You have an agreed upon draw schedule.
Okay.
And you're right, for the really big jobs, you're going to have a bank involved, and they're going to insist that this is how you're going to get your money.
Okay, and before I go to Delegate Queen, I want to say, maybe following up with Vice Chair was talking about, maybe we need to delineate between the smaller and large. And I don't think $5,000. I think if we're going to protect the small businessmen, I think we would raise that to at least 10, if not higher, and do a more of a succinct layout for the to basically anything under 10,000 or whatever number we pick. Anything under that number should be very much in favor of protecting our consumer. Now, all of this is, but when it comes to the larger ones, to Mark's point, the reputable people that you should be wanting to go with, they should have a little more wiggle room. They shouldn't be robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I know that's how businesses work. But if I'm doing a $100,000 project, there should be a little more of an expectation than it would be for a $10,000 project and somebody fixing my gazebo. So maybe that would be an option to satisfy Delegate Queen and as well as everyone else, but I don't think $5,000 properly covers these small projects, especially in this day and age. Carpeting will cost you more than that, not even the whole house. So maybe if we set it at 10 or 15 or 20, whatever and then we have a much, Laura, help me on this one. What do you think? How do you think we could draft this as far as, let's start with let's say 10,000 and under, which we could consider small projects. What would be a competent way of laying these out where it becomes a third, a third, and a third? Is there a way of doing that?
So Delegate Queen's amendments have the third, a third, a third, and the draw schedule, but
avoiding that, giving them 2/3 of the money before they do any work at all. That's my word. That's why I would say 50, 20, but that still gives them half. To Madam Vice Chair's issue, you still have some very small companies with 5 of my $10,000 in their hand with no obligation to come back. And I know people keep talking about the official ways we can go through. You look on a guy's truck, he says he has a number, he says he's licensed. How many people really go through and do that background work to see just what they're licensed for? Because it's just carpeting, right? It's just flooring. So meaning we need to be a much more pro-consumer on the smaller ones, because they're the ones that get taken advantage of, like Robert said. The larger projects, I don't really think this is a concern. So I worry about giving somebody 50% of my money without them doing a damn thing. And I don't know how to do it another way, because the vice chair's the third and a third and third is almost a gentleman's agreement. Like, okay, you look like you got some stuff going. Or in this case, it was demolition. Or in my case, it's you tore down the existing gazebo. Or in another case, it's I laid out my, you ripped up the carpet. The problem is we can't write that in the law and delineate that specifically. I mean, unless you're more of a genius I thought you were, Laura. I don't know how you could do that.
I mean, the only thing that I can think, you're talking about covering the cost of materials. So I think there is a danger in being too prescriptive in the
Right.
law about, well, if the money's needed to cover this, you could get,
Right.
There might be a way for that middle third being specific about like covering costs, but I don't know if that's helpful
It gets real
overall.
dangerous. We're getting very prescriptive there.
Wait,
And,
Wilson, I'm sorry,
who's speaking?
Jason.
Yes, sir.
I just want to say that, going back to the point of the draw schedule, regardless of whether it's a less expensive job or a more expensive job, it protects everybody along the way. That somebody's not going to get paid until work is done. And that sounds like the concern that you're voicing is about the potential scenario. So I just want to throw that out there.
But would you put, are you proffering that every project should have a draw schedule?
You could authorize it.
Because my worry then is that's where the consumer gets lost. And that's where the professional has the upper hand, because he's not going to know what that means more than this is when this guy wants his money. So, because with larger ones, not a problem. Anything over $25,000, which I consider a larger project, that's not a problem. Definitely understand the draw schedules because you're dealing with banks. When it comes to money in my savings account, you have somebody coming up and saying, I can do it for this price. I need half up front. I'll get the rest, I worry about the ones that ask for half up front. They get the money and they just don't come back. And the recourse is to go to Steve. That takes forever. The guy's gone. He's got a new business. And believe me, Joy's on the line listening, going crazy because we had this exact same problem at her house. She got taken advantage of. Then she got sued for mechanics lien because the guy didn't even pay his subs. So, and in the meantime, not only did she lose her money, she had to, that's why I'm getting these crazy texts from her when I'm trying to concentrate. So trying to figure out a way to protect the person like her who spent her own hard-earned money, nothing loaned from the bank, and also make sure that these guys have enough money to operate for these larger projects. And I don't know if a draw schedule would be, I think that'd be too complex for everyone to deal with on a small contract. Yes, Pam?
Delegate Wilson, again, we had two versions of the modified bill.
I saw him.
Okay, so that second version, which allowed it to be 5,000 or more, I have no problem. That makes sense if you want to call a large project 10,000 or more. That's when the draw schedule comes. The biggest difference I have with the chairman's bills are two things. One, substantially complete, although I'm surprised to hear Delegate Dumais defending that, who's a lawyer who knows substantial to me sounds like something I couldn't prove in law. So I'm surprised she feels that way about substantial, but substantial needs to be out. I mean, we don't want to have this bickering of what you call substantial or not.
Does it need to be out if we're, let's say 10,000 below versus above 10,000? Can it be in, if we took it, I agree with you on somebody else's money. If it was below $10,000, the job has to be done before you collect your final payment. Versus
Right.
above 10,000.
To 10,000, you could have a draw schedule, and then that whatever is in that schedule could say what substantially complete is. But anything that does not speak to substantial, draw schedule speaks to substantially complete, needs to be complete. And I think that's where you get the difference.
I agree.
I have a hard time with, and I have a hard time giving somebody 50% when I sign a contract, because again, they haven't come to my house. They haven't even come and brought the equipment. They haven't done anything to show they're ready to do that work. Agree, you are taking a chance with that, using the next 20% when you've done something more than giving somebody half of the money at the time of contract. I've had the experience with what the chairman has said. I've had both experiences where I go into Home Depot, order carpeting, go there Thursday, they're here on Saturday, and I'm paying the whole amount for carpeting. I've done it with that, done it with storm doors, kind of little things I do with Home Depot. I've also had these major contracts where I'm paying, like I said, a third, and a third. I've not had an issue with it, but I'm sure people have. But I think at this point, if we want to get past this bill sometime today, we do 30% at contract signing, 20% when they commence, and the remainder for projects under $10,000, and the others can be subject to a draw schedule or that process as well. The only reason why I do like the draw schedule after talking to Bob was I remember something my neighbor did where, we have these people who go around what they call in Montgomery County doing these McMansions, and he basically renovated his whole house. He had to have an architect. He had to have somebody come and dig. He had to have somebody lay foundation again. And if you put each of those things, you know, on a contract that says when that piece is done, I pay you. That is something I think somebody can understand. So
Well,
I can see a draw schedule can work.
And I want to interrupt. I've got a speaker's delegation meeting at 3, so I wanted to at least pretend that we got a little done today. But here's my thought: is we work off the chairman's bill, we do the 30, 20, and 20. Wait, Pam. Anything under 10,000 has to be complete. Over 10,000 is open to a draw schedule. So you have what you want, and if it's not substantial, if they don't have anything about substantial completion in the draw schedule, we'd assume it's got to be complete. Meaning if they're
okay with that. That's
if they're
okay.
a good contractor working on big projects, they'll have the draw schedule that works for them.
So you're going to take substantially complete out of his amendment, but make it part of the draw schedule.
Can I share the
Okay,
screen?
I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
Mr.
Laura.
I was just going to
I
ask
think
Mr.
I'm
Chair.
almost half.
Yes.
Can I share the screen? I think that what you're talking about is basically changing the dollar threshold in one of Delegate Queen's
I know.
amendments. So I want to just make sure
They were
everybody.
mansplaining, Laura. They were mansplaining. I knew we already had it. Thank you.
Go ahead. However you want to do it.
Yeah, let me just pull it up just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Let's see. Hold on one sec.
In your time, Laura.
I'm looking for it. I have a million things open.
Hopefully we can at least get this passed, and then we'll just try and find another meeting for the other bill.
Okay. All right.
I got
That's
a
the
question in the
chairs.
meantime.
Go ahead.
So is there any, Bob, Lori, Jason, is there any delineating number that comes to your mind when we're trying to bifurcate out these two different types of projects? Is it 5? Is it 10? Is it 25 and below?
I personally don't think there's a magic number. I mean, I think the larger you get, the more chances you have of multiple subcontractors involved. So, I mean, I think 10 probably makes sense, but I don't think there's a magic formula to that. Unfortunately, there's just not something that's going to cover every situation in this bill.
Yeah, and I understand. I was just looking, to cover 80% or 70. And if you think 10 will do it, or if you think 5 is more realistic.
No, I think 10 will do it.
Okay, just because I know that materials have increased significantly, and your average deck these days is just a deck is, 10.
That's why I thought that would be considered a small, and because if you get a $10,000 deck, you have a very small deck.
Yeah.
Which is why I thought 10 would be that good number. Go ahead, Laura.
Okay.
So I think this is the amendment that's closest to what you're discussing, although we'd have to change. So the initial deposit would be up to 1/3.
Right.
Then,
No, ma'am. We did 30%.
Chairman, we should really stick with 1/3 if you're going to move an amendment. 30% is a wonky number. A third is a easier when you're contracting.
And how do we get to no more than half?
Well, you're also keeping existing statute, at least as far as the deposit. So your contractors are going to know 1/3. They're not going to know 30%.
Okay, so then
Stick with 1/3 if you're going to do this.
If we stick with 1/3, we're going to do 23%.
I don't know what you're going to do from there, but I'm going to recommend strong.
You're not helping me. You're not helping me because you just threw out a wrench with no solution. Because now we're saying no more. You can collect 1/3, which is 33%, and then you can collect 26%.
You can collect whatever at start, whatever amount that equates to 50%. That's
right. We're not going to be able
Actually,
to
Pam, so Delegate Queen has, okay, so look, if we're going to work with her amendment, it would be a third down and no more than 1/2 upon commencement of the
total amount.
Of the total amount, right.
Don't use 26%, say no more than 1/2 at the.
Laura, is that something that sounds legally sufficient? Laura, does that sound legally sufficient? Like we can write that and make it and not sound like a high school project?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I agree with you, Chris. I didn't think of it like that. That's a good way of doing it. I just want to make sure, I want to make sure we give no more than 50% prior to starting the project. I think and that's for, so that's that part. So go ahead, Laura.
All right, so it would read a deposit of no more than, a person may not receive a deposit of more than 1/3. The person may not receive payment totaling more than 1/2 of the total amount of the contract price, or the remaining amount until the project is complete, or for contracts over $5,000, the amount of time or the time period specified in the draw schedule.
It'd be 10,000.
Now it's
Right.
10,000.
When I raise
Right,
that
so
up
we
to
would change
10,000.
that to 10,000, and the way this reads right now for those larger contracts, it's just subject to the draw schedule for the final payment.
Correct.
Do you want it to be that, or do you want there to be the option that it's upon completion or subject to a draw schedule? Because
I guess
there may not be a draw schedule. I
then
wouldn't
it would
think.
be upon completion, and hopefully that would deal with Madam Vice Chair's issue of, because the more professional people would put a draw schedule in to make sure they could write in substantial completion.
Okay, so I can flush that out. So for the larger contracts, it would be upon completion or subject to a draw schedule.
Correct. And the smaller complex contracts is just upon completion.
Completion.
And again, guys, does everybody understand the, and I guess we'll have to bring it back and vote on it once you rewrite it?
Well, if you all want to vote on it, I can send out a revised reprint, and then you can just make sure it's whatever you're comfortable with. I mean, I'd hate for it to sit for another.
Me too. I really would. I'd like to get this out, guys. Are we comfortable with voting it out today?
Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with.
Can you say it one more time? Because I'm writing it down. I didn't scratch it out 3 times.
Go
Now,
ahead, Laura.
say it again, Laura.
Okay, so the bill would say a person may not receive a deposit of more than 1/3
1/3, okay.
basically at the time the contract is signed.
Okay, sign. Okay, go ahead.
The person may not receive payment of more than 1/2 of the total cost of the home improvement contract price.
Okay, go ahead.
Or a person may not receive the remaining amount of the contract price until
Completion.
And then for larger projects, those valued at 10,000 or more.
10,000. 10,000. I just want to hear that 10,000.
Yeah, for 10,000 or more, it's the completion or draw schedule.
Or
And
Final
up to
payment.
1/2. And that up to 1/2 is for the beginning of work, correct?
Right. And again, that's up to, they can negotiate for something different. They can do that other, once it's been started or once the carpet's been ripped up, but no more than 1/2.
And jobs 10,000 and below. Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay. Is there anybody else that has an issue? Is there anybody that does not want to move this today?
Mr. Chairman, I actually think this is a good amendment to Queen's amendment. The over $10,000, just so I'm clear, there's still a 1/3 deposit requirement there.
Yes.
Okay, what do you do after that? Do you do after that? It's according to a draw schedule.
The way it's written right now, the draw schedule comes in for the final payment only. So it would be up to 1/3 at signing, the up to 1/2 when the work commences, and then the remaining amount would be subject to a draw schedule for the larger contracts over 10,000 or above.
So that still gives you what you wanted, Chris, that 1/2.
So if a customer says, hey, look, here's my bank's draw schedule, 10%, 20%, 20%, 20%. What we're saying in law is that you can collect up to, the customer can say, well, look, I'm not going to do up to, I'm not going to do it according to what the law says. I'm going to do it according to how the bank's going to give me the money.
Because it's up to, it's just what the contractor can only ask for that amount. He can negotiate for less, but you can't, trick somebody into giving more.
I could support that.
Okay. And do we have, Seth, did I get your input?
Yeah, no, I think given the verbal language, I could support it.
Okay, if anybody doesn't, if everybody seems, can we get a motion?
I make a motion on the amended Queen Amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor of accepting the amended Delegate Queen amendments? Say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it. Okay, we will be sending this out once we get a clean version, right, Laura?
Yes, and can you actually raise your hands for the vote on the bill, because I need to record that.
So we have Seth Howard, aye. Mark Fisher, aye. Delegate Queen, aye. Chris Adams, aye. Lily Chi, aye. Veronica Turner, aye. Chairman, aye.
Okay. So I can revise the amendments, and then if you said subcommittee is going to meet again this week
We're gonna have
potentially.
to. We're gonna have to, guys. So just be aware. I'll try and announce it on the floor if we get some time. Laura, just keep your feelers out about what you think we can do. I'll talk to the chairman, Madam Vice Chair, if you could help me out with that. You know, when you see some time, because I get distracted like a child. So just let me know if you see some time. Let Laura know or shoot me a text, and we'll try and get it in so we can get this other bill started again.
Mr. Chairman, can you add me as a sponsor to the chairman's bill?
Yeah, that's fine.
I
They're not
don't
doing-
know. I
they're not
don't
doing
know if the
co-sponsors
House is
in the
doing
House.
any sponsor amendments.
Oh,
We're not.
Yeah, I don't think Chair Davis is doing any of that, but maybe he could make an exception in
Yeah,
this case.
Well, that's per the speaker's office. There is
It's not necessary. That's okay.
co-sponsoring on bills. That's
There is not.
speaker.
I'll ask, I'll shoot Alex a text
I
and
mean,
see.
it's
if we
still-
can-
Well,
when we,
that's-
for any bills, when we're combining them, can we do this?
Yeah, because we're
Don't worry
combining
about
bills.
it. It's not worth the conversation. Just leave it alone. That's all
Trying
right.
to give you one bill, Chris. One. Come
We
on.
should do that.
Yeah, we can try.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
if you can
I
do that,
agree.
Madam Vice Chair, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, not a problem.
So guys, I'm gonna have to go ahead and we're gonna have to jump out. We'll be paying attention. Gotta get another one in.
12:30 on Thursday is actually a standing meeting time. So if you,
We're going in session at 10, I think.
Well, we can only be on the floor for 2 hours, so.
That's right.
Right. I just got to talk to the chairman about what time he wants to start committee.
Right.
So we'll work something out for Thursday, most likely. Okay. Thank you guys.
Okay.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you for everybody's input. Thank you guys.
hi.
Bye.
All right. I make life hard.